Tell us a little bit about how you produced Back to the Future, the trilogy with Bob Gale. How did you get involved? I guess tell us a little bit how you got involved into producing, and then how you got involved with Zemeckis and Gale.
Okay. Is this on?
Yeah, just hold it up really close.
Is this on? Yeah. Okay. How did I get involved with producing? Well, my first job, I went to work for Peter Bogdanovich and Frank Marshall.
Whoa.
And I came out to LA, and I kind of I was either going to go to law school back east, or I was maybe not going to go to law school. And so I thought, well, I'm in Los Angeles, what could I do? And I thought, well, I could try and work on a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called Peter Bogdanovich's office, because I knew he had been a film critic back in New York. And I thought, well, we have New York in common. Maybe that would be an in. And so I called, and Mae Woods, who was Peter's assistant at the time, she said, "Oh yeah, come on in. You know, we're starting to look and talk about hiring somebody." So I took multiple buses to get from Venice to Burbank. And I got there, and I came in, and I met Mae, I met Frank, and I was waiting to meet Peter. And then Mae handed me a script to read, and she said, "Can you read this script before you meet Peter?" And I'd never read a script before, so I read the screenplay, and when I was finished, she told Peter. He came out, shook my hand, introduced himself, and said, "Come on, I want to talk to you about the screenplay." So I went in, and I told him what I thought about the screenplay. He had read it, and he agreed with my feelings about it. And ultimately, he never made it because I didn't recommend it. So I didn't even really know what that meant at that moment in my life. And anyway, so he hired me right there on the spot and said that they were going to be doing What's Up Doc in San Francisco, and he would need me to come up to San Francisco, be on the set, be with him on the set. Frank who had been Peter's assistant, was promoted, and I would also be working for Frank. So that's what happened. I got up to San Francisco. I started working on a movie. And when we finished filming, I learned a lot of things about production at that moment in time. Because on that movie, we started in San Francisco. We came back down to Los Angeles. And then we went back up for the chase. Because in the screenplay, in What's Up, Doc, it says, "And the chase begins, ... the chase ends." So they had to figure out what the ... were. And so, but I learned that that's not the way you would normally, do a movie. And Frank was always, I would ask Frank questions, and he would always give me this useful information. I didn't even realize how useful it was at the time. And so, when we were done with the filming, I thought I was going to go back east and go to law school, and that's what my parents thought also. And but I didn't. Peter said, "Well, stay, and go through post-production. You might as well learn the whole process, experience the whole thing." And then when we finished that, at that moment in time, this is a little bit off the track, but I'll just go with it. Peter was supposed to do The Getaway. Walter Hill was writing the screenplay. Actually, it was when I first met Walter. He was one of my closest and dearest friends. And Peter was going to direct it. Peter had a falling out with Steve McQueen. We ended up going to do Paper Moon, and Sam Peckinpah ended up doing The Getaway, and probably the world's better with Peckinpah doing The Getaway and Peter doing Paper Moon. And so Peter said, come, let's go do Paper Moon. Don't worry about law school. You can always go to law school. But we're making a movie.
Yeah.
And so I did. Next thing I knew, they shipped me out to Kansas and to Missouri looking for locations. And I started learning more and more about production. And we have to find period cars. We have to find period wardrobe and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I was kind of learning this about producing without even realizing I was learning it, right? And so I ended up with Peter, and that's kind of how I got into it, and that's how I started to learn about producing. I never went to film school, but I taught for 14 years at the American Film Institute.
So you didn't come from a filmmaking
No.
or writing or directing. You were.
No, I came from I was a fan of movies.
Yeah.
And the thought of, of working on a movie seemed so remote that, I don't know, I just kind of jumped at the opportunity. I was here in Los Angeles, it was 1971. The world was a different place. It was kind of nice, and, you could see that there was a path, right? So you could be a PA, you could work your way up and up the production ladder, and ultimately you would then make a choice. Did you want to be a writer, a director, or a producer? But you could sort of be learning from all that. So that's kind of what I did.
Today there's similar path. You're a PA, you work your way up, you become an influencer and get 1 million followers, and then maybe you get to do something. What would you say? Yeah, exactly. I say that as somebody who produces for digital content like that. But yeah, that is actually a path. But it's we want to talk about that. What would you say? Because so when I was a kid, right? I love movies. I love filmmaking. I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I could tell you, this is what a director does. I'm saying, or this is what a writer does. This is what, and then people would say, what does the producer do? And I'm like, I don't know. They get the money. They make the phone. I have no idea. And then now that I'm in it, when I produce something, I do digital web series and sketches and stuff like that, and I'll produce it, write it, and direct it, and I don't know where the line is, but I can tell you what I did as a producer. I can't always tell you what I did as a director. For me, the role of the producer is a lot more defined to me because you just have to get the thing done. So how would you describe for people what a producer does? Like for me, the number one thing is a problem solver. But what would you say as a job of the producer?
It is. I mean, problem solving is the key. The other is trying to ultimately create an atmosphere where everyone, the director and the cast, the cinematographer, they can all find sort of peace so they can focus on creating the movie.
Yeah.
Right? So you're kind of like a shortstop, you're catching the line drives, you're picking up the hot grounders, and so you're trying to keep all that away from what I would call the creative team. You're trying to create that environment. In order to do that, you kind of have to know everything, right? So you have to know what the script is, what's the director's point of view on it, what do the actors need to know. You'll talk to a producer who worked with an actor that you're thinking about using. So you have to kind of understand that, and you kind of have to sort of anticipate any potential problem, and that's the hardest thing to do because you don't know that you need to think about something until you get burnt on some other movie.
Yeah.
Right, so you start to understand that. So you start to go, well, so the prop man comes up to you the day you're supposed to shoot some sequence and tells you he doesn't have the prop that you're doing that day. You go, well, why are you telling me now? If you told me 2 days ago, I could probably have solved the problem, but now you're asking me to go tell the director that he doesn't have the prop that he needs for today's shoot. So then we have to then figure out, well, can we shoot it and then just pretend that the actor has it in their hand and then do an insert of it, the hand holding that prop later on. But you have to sort of learn to anticipate, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And you just kind of have to know that. So in the simplest way of thinking of a producer, obviously there's the money and all that part of it, but the simplest thing is you ask the questions as a producer, and the director answers the questions.
Yes.
Right? So, how many extras do we need in this scene? I need 50. Well, we can only afford 25. Can you know what I'm saying? But that's kind of how.
Get double costumes.
Yes, that's kind of how,
Here's 10.
or shoot this side of the room, right? And you don't see over here, and then we'll shoot over,
Yeah.
do a shot and do, over here, and it's the same people. We've just taken the people in the front row and put them in the back row up to the front, that kind of thing. And so, but so you're constantly asking questions.
Yeah.
Right, and people are coming to you with problems. You're asking questions, but that's kind of what it is. It's an all-encompassing thing. And for me, I know there are lots of producers who they don't go to the set. They're in their office, do all the hotel, depending whatever it is that you're doing. But for me, there's nothing that's going to happen in my office or nothing that's going to happen in a hotel that needs my attention. So for me, being on the set is the key, because that's where all the action is. That's where all the questions arise, and that's where, for me, I need to be as a producer.
Yeah, I always say that the job of the director is to make a decision. So you want this red chair or the blue chair? Decide. And if you're a director, just say something, because if you don't, then nobody will trust your choice. But like what you just said makes me think. The director's job is to make a choice, and it's the producer's job to give him options.
Yes.
To say, well, we have 3 red chairs, but 2, so I like what you said. It's he answers or the director answers the question, the producer asks the question. Yeah, that's really cool.
Because you also have to know the script and have spent a lot of time with the director in pre-production, so that you understand it, so that the director may say, "Oh, let's go with the red chair," and you can say, "Oh, I thought we were going to use the red chair in that other scene. Will that be confusing depending upon what the story is?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I forgot." Because a director's thinking in that moment, right? What do I need to get the day's work? How am I going to shoot this scene? And I have to say, as a producer, focused on not just today, but tomorrow and the next day and the next day, right? So it's the same thing like with casting. So I try to I don't make the choices about who's in the movie. That's the director's responsibility. But I go to watch the readings, so that I know actors that the director wants to use, but I also know actors that maybe were runner up for that particular role. And you may find yourself, because this has happened, where an actor falls out at the very last minute because they're shooting something else. They're not going to finish that actor on time, or they just got hired to be in a series and they're no longer available. And you need an actor for the next day's work. And you can say, well, remember the actor who was your second choice for this role? He would be really good at this. And they can say, oh yeah, that person was great. So, so I'll call their agent, I'll call the casting director, I'll call whatever to try and get that, see if that actor is available. So you have to you have to retain all this information, which gets harder and harder the older you get. But you have to try and do that.
And I think we all know, or at least most of the people here know, how the production of Back to the Future, how all the difficulties it's had, all the different things, different actors that were replaced, that, all this sort of stuff. So I would say we all love Back to the Future. We say it's so well directed, so well written, but I think it's clear that it's really well produced. Like the things, and we'll get to it, but the things that the production have to go through and pivot. Yeah, I mean, this is why I wanted to have you, because it's really well produced. And imagine any other movie that went through a main character change in the middle of it. It would just stop. They would just not film it anymore, and that's happened. There's a movie recently that they just canceled halfway through shooting it for stuff like that. So that's kind of what I want to talk to you, and we'll get to. So how did you get involved with Zemeckis and Gale? And was it one of them that you knew, or how did you get?
It was Frank Marshall. I had made a movie. I had made a movie, Buckaroo Banzai, and thank you, Team Banzai, my partner in that movie, Rick Richter, W.D. Richter, who was a screenwriter, but he directed Buckaroo. And we had an overall deal at Warner Brothers. And Rick was back east, and I was sitting at the office reading screenplays looking for our next project.
Yeah.
And
This is Warner Brothers.
yes,
Okay.
and my phone rang. The hard line. We didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't have computers, so and it was Frank Marshall calling, and he asked what I was doing, and I said, well, I'm sitting in the office reading screenplays. I mean, that's, you know, I've got my feet on the desk, and that's kind of what I'm doing. And he said, Bob Zemeckis wants to talk to you. And I said, oh, wow, great. Where? You know, I'll go to him. Where is he? He said, no, he's on the lot at Warner's. I said, well, so am I. I'll just walk to his office. He said, no, you can't walk to his office. He's going to come to you. I'm going to call him and let him know that, can he come now? I said, yeah. So Bob came over, and he had a manila envelope with him. And he sat down, and we just talked in general. We talked about movies we had seen and liked. We just talked about, you know, getting to know each other. I had never met Bob. I was a fan of used cars, and I Want to Hold Your Hand, and soon to be a fan of Romancing the Stone. So we just sat around and talked, like, you know, like two people would about movies. You know, this movie or that movie. What about that act? You know, that kind of stuff. And Jen, we spoke for about an hour, and then Bob said he needed to get back to his office, and he said, if I give you a script to read, will you read it? And would you have any interest in producing away from Warner Brothers? And I said, well, it depends on the screenplay, but sure. So I said, he gave me the script, and I said, well, you know what? I'll read it tonight, and I'll call you tomorrow. And when Bob left the office, and Frank had said to call him when Bob left. So Frank said, how'd the meeting go? I said, well, it was great. He's a great guy. You know, I feel like we really got along really, really well. He said, did he give you a script? I said, he did. He said, are you going to read it? I said, yeah, as soon as I go home, I'm going to read it. And he said, great. So I read the script. It was Back to the Future. It was an earlier draft. You know, Einstein was a chimpanzee or a monkey. It was a monkey.
Yeah.
What year was this when this was happening?
1984, something like
Oh,
that.
okay. Wow.
Around there.
That's pretty close.
Close,
to
yeah.
Yeah, like 80, maybe.
And sorry, I'm sure you're gonna get to it, but at that point was the script still with Columbia, or had been greenlit, or was it with Universal already, or?
It was at Universal.
Okay.
And Steven had gotten involved, which is
Okay.
how Frank and Kathy got involved,
Okay.
because they worked for Steven. And so I read the script that night, and I thought it was wonderful. But I mean, the DeLorean was not in the movie, right? It was a refrigerator that was going to shake back and forth and all that kind of stuff. And no part had been cast other than I knew that Bob wanted Michael J. Fox if it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? But they hadn't reached out yet. And so I called Bob the next morning, told him I loved the script. I would love to be involved. And he said, well, can I have lunch with him and Bob Gale? It was here in Burbank. I forget it was like a hamburger place that, you know, had, it was a pretty good hamburger place. That's all I remember. Anyway, so I met Bob Gale and Bob for lunch. And it was like, I mean, they knew each other for forever. They had been partners for a long time. But it was like, I knew them forever, right? We just sat, it was really easy, everything was good. I really liked them, they really liked me. And so they asked me if I wanted to do the movie, and I said I did, and they said, great. You know, and we kind of said, okay, we'll do it. And then I had to call up my lawyer and say, so I'm going to go do this movie. It's at Universal. I know my deal's at Warner's, so we need to get suspended and extended and that kind of thing. So that's kind of what happened. So I went over to, I called Frank to let him know. They gave us office space at, Bob Z at that time was going to do a movie. He was prepping another movie.
Yeah.
That he didn't end up doing, which was Wildcats. Right. You guys know that movie with Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes, right? The movie and Goldie. They were like football players in high school, and Goldie Hawn was their coach, I think.
Oh.
And so that movie did get made, but not with Bob.
Okay.
So Bob left that movie. We all moved over to the movies to Amblin, into the movies while you wait building. And we started to get going. Then we found out we couldn't get Michael. He wasn't available. And Michael's just written this book about it that's really
Yeah.
good. If you haven't read it,
Yeah.
it's Future Boy, it's really good. And anyway, so so we just started working together. Bob and Bob obviously had history, and so I needed to develop a relationship with Bob Gale so that we could work together, right? Because I had total respect and appreciation and ultimately love for Bob Gale, but we just had to sort of get together. So we would kind of divide some things up, and I might deal with this thing, and Bob would deal with that, and then we would touch base, and our offices were in the same building, so that was all kind of easy, and it was kind of natural. It was like I was dealing with family members, and so it was a good thing, and we just started to get going on the project.
Did Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gill ask you to change your name to Bob just to?
There are already two Bobs.
I thought that was part of like their working together thing.
So had we been roommates, maybe.
So Frank Marshall's the one that got you in. So he
Yes.
recommended you, and then you guys met.
Yeah.
And then previously for like used cars and stuff, it had just been Gale producing.
Yes.
And so they were like, we're gonna need another guy, and you were that other guy.
Yes, I was that other guy, and then on Romancing the Stone, Bob Bob Gale was not involved.
Yeah.
And that was the first one they did apart.
Yeah.
And so I think Bob Z maybe felt it would be good to have someone else, because Bob G could still keep working on the screenplay and do all those other things, that he was doing.
So let me ask you, you were under contract with Warner Brothers, right?
Yeah.
The movies at Universal had previously been at Columbia, and Universal had to buy it from them. How do you think the movie would have been different under a different studio? Like if Warner Brothers had bought the movie, do you think it would have been different? Like did Warner Brothers make different types of movies and they would have turned into something else? Or do you think it would have been essentially the same?
Well, I think Bob would have wanted to make the same movie.
Yeah.
So it just has to do with studio interference, having Steven, kind of help with that, because the studio at Universal, they held Steven and rightly so in such high esteem, so that
That protected.
that was like a little buffer
Yeah.
that maybe we wouldn't have had at some other studio. I don't know. The truth is, every studio in town passed on the movie.
Yeah.
Every single studio, all those rocket scientists who were running those studios, they all said no.
They didn't see
all
that.
said no one wants to see a movie about time travel, or no one wants to see a movie where, the mother's in love with her son. No one wants to see
Some
that.
people want to see that. It's a different kind of movie theater. But no, yeah. So it's at Universal. You start working on it. As a producer, you have the script. You have obviously the director. It's already signed. And what are the first steps that you go? What's your first day at work, working with the Bobs? What is the first thing?
Some of the crew we knew. Dean had worked with Bob, so we knew Dean was going to do it. Alan Silvestri had worked, so we knew Alan was going to do the music, and so there were pieces that we knew were going to happen. But we started to we've got to find some locations. Where are we going to do this?
Yeah.
We made a trip up to Northern California, trying to find Hill Valley. And then at a certain point, we realized we need control of this town.
Yeah.
We didn't know there was going to be a 2 and a 3, right? So, but we still need control of this town.
Yeah.
And we realized, well, we could never get that control that we needed. So we then decided, well, what if we did it on the back lot at Universal, right? So you start to go through those.
Start making the question.
Making those choices, right? You ask those questions. We're trying to figure that out. At the same time, you're compiling lists, you know, for casting, and we hoped we could get Michael. We couldn't, you know, and then we had to find. We did a lot of, you know, searching. We did testing on actors.
We've all seen I think we've all seen the cast list where it's like Ben Stiller and
Yeah.
some of the top people, and it's like they're all great, but they're not.
They weren't
Marty.
Marty.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you know, Eric Stoltz is a good actor.
Yes.
He just wasn't Marty.
Yeah, I wanna talk about that whole situation a little bit, but I want to go back to the locations.
Go ahead.
So, this is a personal question. What places did you guys look at to be like this might be Hill Valley?
It was in Northern California. It was a couple of, I don't remember the exact names of the places, but a couple of those little sort of gold rush towns that are up there. Do you know? And so we would look and we would say, oh, well, this works over here, but we have to do this to this store over here and this to this store here.
Yeah.
And we need to close their business to do it, so we have to buy them out. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Then all of a sudden it becomes a financial problem. It's just much too expensive.
Yeah.
You know, and so Bob, you know, would think, well, maybe we don't have to go in the store, but what if we do? You know,
But it restricts you. Your choices are restricted.
So the choices were restricted. So, and then we just thought we'd have more control if we put it on the back lot.
Yeah. There's a
And also because you needed Hill Valley in the present day and in the past. So what were we going to do while we were waiting to address that? Were we going to be there and then find other locations up there, or come back down here and then go back up there? It was too complicated at a certain point.
And then let's talk about other locations. Actually, no, I want to go back. I got ahead of myself. When the script still had the atomic bomb sequence,
Yes.
as a producer, I mean, I know Bob Z is like, oh, this is how it's going to look, and Bob Gill, I mean, he's a producer too, but as a writer, he's like, this is how, you know, as a producer, you read this, you go, how am I going to make this? Like, what were your thoughts when you're like, that was still the plan? What were you thinking when that was the movie that was going to be made? Or did you not? Or were you not part of that?
No, I was. I didn't have any doubt about, you know, that Bob could do a great job shooting it. I didn't have any doubt about that. It was really just about the cost, right? And it was going to. I didn't think we could afford it.
Yeah.
Or afford to do the justice to it that you know that it would deserve. It was such a big part of the movie. So we just talked about that, and then that just then became a discussion, and I think it was Bob Gale. I don't actually remember, but I think it was Bob Gale came up with lightning.
Yeah.
That part of it, and but it just was about, well, we can't afford to do this. It's just the shooting time, the effects, all that kind of stuff. It's just going to add up to be too much.
And then in terms of locations, what were some locations, or do you have any stories? I love locations. Obviously, we visit all these filming locations, but even in my own productions, I love going and finding places and say, this could turn into this. Were there any of these famous locations that were like really easy to work with? Some that you're like, oh, never mind, like, let's not ever go back there, then you had to for the sequel. Like, do you have any interesting, as somebody who's been dealing with locations for this event, and I have my own stories, do you have any stories about dealing, as a producer, dealing with the locations?
Well, only and not that every place we filmed, the people were nice, they were welcoming and all that, so that wasn't really an issue. The issue was, I don't want to go back to Puente Hills Mall, I don't want to go back to Whittier. It's just it's too far.
It's far.
You're spending a lot of your day. The people at the school are incredible. They still are.
Yeah.
But it was just like, it's a long way to go.
Yeah.
And so that means it's a long way home for everybody, and so that affects whatever sleep they're going to get, and it's a long way back the next day. So it's, if you can find things that are a little bit closer, a little more accessible, like the church on Highland, that was close. That was a lot better than going back down, to Whittier.
But then when you guys filmed the 1985 part where Marty goes to the audition, and it's supposed to be the school gym, but it's a different gymnasium, and they, you have a poster in the back that says "New Gym" to imply that it's been rebuilt. But somebody told me that the reason you guys filmed that there was it was at the end of the production, and you didn't want to have to go back to United Methodist. It was easier to deal with McCambridge. Is that true, or it was just a creative choice to have a different gym?
I don't actually remember.
Yeah.
To be honest, it just was. I mean, because it was like the end of production.
Yeah.
And by the end of production, it's you know how Bob Zemeckis would say, you know, making a movie is like being nibbled to death by ducks. You know, there's not one bite that hurts, but you're just sore all over. And so when you get towards the end of it, if there's a possibility of something being easy,
Yeah.
you go, let's just do the easy.
Yeah.
Why are we killing ourselves?
Yeah, in the locations tour, the fans have gotten so specific about locations that we have found a church that's in the picture in part 2 where Marty and Jennifer are married, and we went to it earlier this week, and the lady let us inside, and you know it was a whole thing. And I told the people, that's just up the street from Universal. That's just a drive up. So it's like, oh, grab Elizabeth Shue, a camera, go up there. No need to go down to Hollywood. No need to, you know. So I feel like a lot of those choices were made like that. Like what's nearby. The Burger King is I figured this out once. The Burger King, Doc's Burger King, is the closest Burger King to Universal. So I mean, obviously there's other reasons. I imagine, you know, the driveway and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like that's the easiest place to go. You know, you're gonna go.
It's movie, like I said, movies you get nibbled to death, and they're hard. You know, they are hard to do, and people and the you know as the shoot progresses, people get more and more tired. It's not. There isn't anything about making movies that you would recommend to somebody if they wanted to have a healthy life choice. It's just not, you know. You're eating chili at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can't do that. You know what I'm saying? And be healthy. And so if there's a Burger King, then you just go to the Burger King. What's the stairs? We need a staircase. Hey, there's a staircase to the next building. Can we use
At the
it?
Hilton,
Sure.
we were there earlier this week, but it's like
why can't we just use it? You know, I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't. I've worked with directors who have. I can say his name, George Miller. He's a great director. Great director. The Witches of Eastwick. He's a great director. And we found Polly Platt, brilliant production designer, you know, and she found a house that was what George wanted. And we go out to look at this house, and George says, the house is perfect, but can we find it in another location? And I go, no. No, they can't. We found the house. You yourself said it's perfect. Why are we going someplace else?
Yeah.
She's got other things to find.
Yeah.
So let's just say, check, we got this one. Let's move on to something else. And you have to do that sometimes as a producer. So, hey, Burger King.
One of the fun locations things that I noticed it, but now people know about it. That I noticed that as a producer was in part 2 when Biff is coming out of his house, and we know that's in Bushnell in South Pasadena, and then we see the back of Marty's head, and then we switch and it's Marty looking through the binoculars, and I thought, would they take Michael all the way out to Bushnell just to shoot the back of his head? And then I looked at the house behind it, like those houses don't look like the ones at Bushnell, and no, it was shot on Colonial Street at Universal. Because why drive Michael J. Fox all the way out to Bushnell to shoot the back of his head? So that's the sort of. But I noticed it as a producer. You go, why would they do that? When you don't think in those terms, you go, yeah, they brought the whole cast there. But I'm assuming that's the choices that you guys were making.
Sure, you make that choice because it's easy to shoot at Universal. You don't have to move all these trucks. And do all that kind of stuff. It's just.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the situation with Eric. Everybody. Personally, I always think that's asked too much. Like, but from producing standpoint, I think it's really interesting having to pivot a production. So I'm curious, at what point were you guys kind of like, okay, this is going to have to change? I assume Zemeckis and Gale kind of thought of it already, and at some point they came to you with it. So tell us a little bit about that conversation when they came to you about that.
Okay, so it's almost like that, but not quite.
Okay.
It
was your choice. You made the comment.
Bob Zemeckis spent a Saturday in the editing room just trying to look at the assembly that Artie Schmidt had put together at that point in time. And we were, whatever it was, 4 weeks into shooting, something like that. I just wanted to get a feel for it. And he called me it was either Saturday night or Sunday morning, I forget what it was, and he said, good news, bad news. Good news, Tom's great, Chris is great, Leah's great. Bad news, Eric is not he's not the character we want him to be. Okay, so what do you want to do? And he said, well, I need you and Bob Gale to go to look at the footage tomorrow. So Bob Gale and I went and we looked at the footage, and we both absolutely agreed with Bob Zemeckis that Eric, who was the heart of the movie, after all, it's his family and it's his friendship with Doc, right? And he's the heart of the movie. He just wasn't the person we needed him to be. And then it became, well, what do we want to do about it? And one of the beautiful things about being young and is you can try most anything, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, just an aside, I worked with Orson Welles for a while.
Wow.
And Orson, he would say, when you're first starting out, you're building your career, and everything is really important to you. When you get to your middle age, once you have a career, it's not so important to you. You know, you get a little sloppy, right? So if something doesn't work, you go, nah, it's okay, we'll fix it. It's not, you know what I mean? So you get sloppy. And then when you get older, you go, I only have so many years left, and I have so many stories still to tell. And you get that energy back that you had when you first started out.
Okay.
Okay?
That's
Nice.
interesting.
So we were young, and we were, you know, Bob had directed 3 movies. I had produced a Buckaroo. Bob Gale had written 3 movies, I guess, right? 1941 and the other 2, and so we just said, okay, well, what do we want to do? And Bob Zemeckis said, well, you know, we should have Michael J. Fox.
Yeah.
We need to have him.
That's who you wanted, yeah.
That was his first choice. It was Bob Gale's first choice, and became my first choice, you know, once I got to know him early on. And so, well, how are we going to do that? You know, we can't just like stop. We have to keep shooting. And so it was, well, we got to go to Universal, but we can't go to Universal without Steven on our side. And so we said, okay, you know, Bob he had to think about what we were going to be shooting that day. And I think I said, or maybe it was Bob Gale and I, we said, we'll talk to Frank and Kathy, and can we show them the footage? And Bob Z said, yes, of course, show them the footage. Because we felt to get Steven, we needed to get Frank and Kathy. Because then Steven would be saying no to Frank, Kathy, Bob. He could say no to me. That's not you know what I mean? But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's what we did. They agreed. We talked to Steven. And Steven, I think Steven agreed, but he certainly believed. Bob Z went to talk to Steven, director to director.
Yeah.
You know, a mentor to protege. So he believed it. He believed Bob. And so, okay, can we do this? And so Steven reached out to Gary Goldberg on the TV show. And this is all on Future Boy, so if you read it, I don't have to tell you that part of it. We knew that we needed to put together some sort of shooting plan. How could we do this for Universal? And so that's what we did. I worked. But we had to do it quietly. We couldn't just say to people in the crew, "This is what's happening," right? Because they were shooting. Right? We were shooting stuff out in Puente Hills, and so we had to work on that quietly. So I spent time with Frank, and then picking Bob Gale's brain. And picking some other people's brain. We put together, like, how could we do this? And it was decided, well, we could go back to all the locations that we had been. So I had to check to make sure we left everything in good standing. Check. And then we had to figure out, Bob said he didn't need to shoot anyone else's coverage, he just needed to shoot the stuff we shot on Eric. Okay, so we could do, we could do that, we could figure this out. So how much was that gonna cost? So I worked on that, what we thought it was going to cost. So then we knew we had Michael. Steven told us that. So they set up a meeting with Universal, and it was Steven, Frank, Kathy, Bob, me, Sid Sheinberg, I think Sean Daniel was there, and I don't remember if Lou Wasserman was there or not.
Yeah.
I should remember that. I think he might have been. And we presented this, and they thought we were insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like,
They did. They just said, "You guys are crazy."
Yeah.
I mean,
As far as you know, has this ever been done before? Has a
No.
main character been recast in the middle?
no.
Yeah.
They thought, "Well, you guys are just crazy. You can't do this."
Yeah.
yeah.
And you know, but we want to do it, and here's the plan. And how much is going to cost? Well, this is how much it's going to cost us. And Bob, you're signing off on this plan. And if you guys, you know, mess this up, we're coming after you and your homes and your families. You know, that kind
Yeah,
of
of
thing,
course,
you
yeah.
know. And okay.
I read a book about Wasserman recently. I'm like, oh yeah.
Right, so it's like that kind of stuff, you know, and so, you know, we didn't cost that much money originally, and they didn't really particularly, you know, it's like they were doing a favor to Steven. It kind of felt like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we just went ahead and they said okay, and then we went out to Puente Hills. That's where we were filming, and I was going to tell Chris about it. Chris was out there, and Bob was going to tell Leah. Bob Dale was going to tell Leah, and Bob Z was going to talk to Eric, and Frank and Kathy were going to call Eric's agents at CAA. Anyway, we had this like whole plan, and we were filming nights. So we were shooting, and when it was the dinner break, I think it was that right, the dinner break. So like midnight, we kicked our plan into action.
Yeah.
And we told everybody, and different reactions. You know, Leah thought she was in trouble because she was out of the country.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And she wasn't supposed to be out of the country, but she was. Chris, you know, Eric was a method actor, so you had to call him by the name Marty. So you could never address him as Eric.
Yeah.
So when Chris met him, he met him as Marty. And he just thought, well, you know, a guy named Marty got cast as Marty. He didn't know him. He didn't have any prior relationship with him, right? Leah had a prior relationship with him, but Chris didn't. And so I told Chris, and we called the crew together after they all came back from dinners, whatever it was, 12 something, 12:30, and we told them what was going on and that no one was going to lose their job and there'd be a new actor on Monday.
Yeah.
And then on a personal note, I had a pager. We didn't have phones or anything. My pager beeped. It was my wife. I went to the payphone at the mall, called her, and she was in labor, and I had to hurry home and get her to the hospital.
And they named the baby Eric.
Yeah, named the baby Gabrielle.
All right. Congrats.
Was there any? I've heard this, and I just want to ask if there's any truth to it. That I think it was Sid Sheinberg who wanted Eric, and then he said, "You guys cast him, and I can. If you
Yes.
don't, if it doesn't work out, I'll greenlight the
Yeah,
reshoot."
he said that, but he just thought, you know, no.
Yeah,
I mean, they had made the movie Mask with Eric.
Yeah.
And he was really good in it.
he's very good.
It's just Back to the Future's a different movie
Yeah.
than Mask.
So when he said that wasn't something that was in the back of your guys' mind, like, oh, we have the safety net.
We said
or-
we said we could throw that at him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If it becomes a thing and they're not going to go, we said, but
Yeah.
Sid, you said this, but he would say, let me see that piece of paper, and he'd rip it out.
Yeah. So the next question is one of the main things, and this week we had Dean Kundi, and yesterday we were lucky enough our tour group got to go to a screening that had Deborah Scott, costume designer, and I asked her this question, and I'm asking it to you, and I'm gonna ask Bob Gill next time I see him, because my friend JD, who's over there, he's the biggest Back to the Future fan in terms of height. He's the tallest one. He asked me, he said that he wanted to know this. You guys shot for 5 weeks and then had to recast, go back, and reshoot a lot of things. What did you learn in those 5 weeks that allowed you to make a better movie in the reshoots? Or was there anything that you were like, oh, we did it this way, let's do it this way? My theory, and you know, some of the stuff that Dean said kind of it goes against it, is that the reason Back to the Future is so good is because they got to go back and redo a lot of stuff and make it better than it might have been if it didn't have those reshoots. So I'm gonna throw that at you as a producer. Do you think that the movie is ultimately better because you got to go and reshoot things and make things better, or do you think
Yeah,
Yeah.
the movie's better because Michael's in the movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
that's the bottom line. Sure, if Bob decided he needed to pick up a shot and we
Yeah.
got that shot, sure. But the story's the story. Michael's what gave the story life. You know, his relationship with Chris is the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's not maybe something looks a little better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or we did. Maybe it forced us to do things, you know, so we had to build on the stage, the innards of a clock tower and the ledge of the clock
Yeah.
tower, right? So we could shot that on the stage because we had to wait to get Michael each day, so we had to keep shooting. So maybe we shot that differently than we would have had we had, you know, him up on the clock tower up there, you know, a safety
Yeah.
in. So maybe some of that was a little bit better,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, the biggest change to the movie was Michael.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was meant to be Marty McFly. And,
Yeah.
and you know, and it's great that it worked out that way.
So, forget the implication that it's better so the actual question that JD has, what did you learn in those first 5 weeks that you were able to specifically that you were able to readjust for like you mentioned the ledge. Was there anything else like that you guys said, okay, we did it this way, let's try to do it this way, or was it? Did you just? I think Dean essentially said that he was told just do it everything how you did it before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was essentially it. Just
Okay.
do it the way we did it before. I mean, it's we know we saved footage on. So if we had a close up on Chris or a close up on Leah, we didn't have to reshoot those. You know, we could just use those again.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, as a producer, one of the big things was when you leave a location, make sure you leave it on good terms.
Yes.
So
'Cause you
that
gotta
in case you have to call and go back, you want to be able to do it.
Or-
And fortunately, that happened. Every
Yeah.
location we had to go back to, that worked out that way.
That's what I mean. That's what
The same thing.
That's what I'm learning with with this event. We have to be really good with the locations because
Yeah.
they won't have us back if we're
Yeah.
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 And then so I'm going to open it up to questions. Just one more thing. You went into part 2, right? Your first sequel, and not just a sequel, it's double sequel.
Right.
How let's say the pre-production, the prepping a sequel to a movie. How does that differ from just bringing something from the ground up? Is it harder? Is it easier?
It's harder.
Okay.
Because you have a different pressure, and that is the audience knows the actors, knows the characters.
Yeah.
And everyone who's seen the movie has an idea of what they think the sequel should be. So you're not showing them the movie with a blank slate. This is our movie. You don't know what it is. Sit back, enjoy it. It's like, oh, why would they do that? Why would Chris do that? Why would Marty do that? So everyone had an opinion, and that made it, you know, much harder
Yeah.
for Bob and Bob when they were doing the script, you know, and then the whole thing with what happened with, you know, turning it into 2 and 3, that made it even more complicated.
Yeah.
You know, so that we just felt the pressure, and then Universal put a lot of pressure on us because the reason they wouldn't just do one big movie for 2 is they didn't want to make the most expensive movie ever
Yeah,
made,
yeah.
which is nothing compared to what movies cost now.
Exactly,
But it was
yeah.
nothing then. But so we had that pressure, which is, well, we can't go back and change something this time because they're going to kill us.
Yeah.
You know, because Universal had made commitments to distributors and theaters to theaters around the world about when they were going to get this movie, and if we messed that up,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So it was a whole different. There was a lot more pressure.
Yeah. I'm going to open the floor out for questions, and then we're going to move on to the panel. So that's right here.
Thank you so much for making your movie. I love your movie. I think I said that. My question is when you getting into the project, when you read the script, the original one, what was the change you made in the script in terms of story elements, anything you made, the changes, even the logistic, because of you changed the story elements because of logistic, what was your idea you give it to the script and you change it, the story?
I mean, to be honest, you know, there's little things I probably recommended here or there. I mean, I had worked with Christopher Lloyd on Buckaroo, right? He played John Big Boutte on that movie, and so I had worked with him. So, you know, when they said, well, what about Doc Brown? I threw his name out there, but Bob met him and, you know, wanted to go with him. So you know, that would be a thing, because I had the experience of working with him and John Lithgow, and you know, either one of them could have done it, though. So, you know, it's hard to imagine anyone but Chris now. But there wasn't, you know what I mean? There were changes in the script, but Bob, they're, you know, they're just like geniuses. And so, you know, you could be standing on the set and say, oh, you know, this would be funny if they said that, but, and, you know, and Bob would, you know, if he wanted to, would try that, but it wouldn't be like that. I mean, if I was gonna do something, I might say to Bob Gale, you know, so this is what the location is, you know, and but Bob Gale is the most amazing writer I've ever met, because Bob Gale would work the hours that we worked when we shot the movie, right? So if we were shooting from 5 in the afternoon till 5 in the morning, Bob Gale would be there, right? Because if something had to change, he needed to do it then. It didn't do him any good to come in the next morning and do it and look at the footage. So he's the only writer I know who was he was the producer also, but he was there all the time, and he's an amazing human being. For those of you who've met him, I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
You realize that.
Question right
Kind of
here.
like a two question. Like the first one is, did you had a plan B if Universal said no about the change for Buddy McFly when?
No.
Oh, it was just that. It was just like that.
That was
Okay.
that was the original plan.
The-
They said no,
Yeah.
so Plan B would have, I guess, was Eric. But we
Okay.
wanted to go back to Plan A.
Got it. And the second question was, when did you realize that this film was gonna be that big? When you were shooting, or
No,
it was-
not while we were shooting. It's really hard to judge a movie when you're shooting.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
You're so wrapped up in the day-to-day of it, you know. And everything always looks great in dailies, but somehow it doesn't always work when it's cut together.
Yeah.
But when we had our preview up in San Jose,
Okay.
and it was Bob and Frank and Kathy and Steven and me, but only one person from Universal. We only would allow one person to come up there with us, and the audience didn't know anything about it. We weren't done. A lot of the ILM visual effects weren't done yet, and we played that movie played, and it was the audience was just like so with the movie, and had these moments, and then when the car started to fly at the end, they went berserk.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
so you
was
just
so-
thought. Steven said, I mean, I didn't know how you could tell, you know. But Steven had his theory, and we've far exceeded the amount. So like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but like Steven said, if you have 3 moments in a movie where the audience applauds, right, or screams, then your movie's going to be a success. And we had something like, 8 or 9. Steven said this movie's going to be a huge hit.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
And then the cards came in. They give out cards, right?
The
So the
feedback,
audience,
yeah.
you guys maybe participate in that, and they came back 99%, very good to excellent, and that was the highest rating ever in the history at Universal.
Wow.
And so when we went back the next day, and Universal saw that, they said it has to be a mistake. It's not possible. It's not possible. So they said we need to have another screening at Universal in the Hitchcock Theater. And the one thing you don't ever want to do as a producer is have your movie screen at a studio lot, because it's not like a regular movie. So if you go into a movie theater, you're going to go get yourself a Coca-Cola or some popcorn or wherever you're going to get, and you're going to sit down and have a movie-going experience. You can't do that at a studio. So right away, the audience isn't like...
It's different.
It's different. And it scored 99% that night. And so...
Of
so
course. Still is.
On that note, we're gonna cut the questions now because we want to move on to the stunt team. But thank you so much, Neil.
oh, yeah, my pleasure.
And yeah, let's give it up again for Neil.
Thank you all for being fans. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's have